Hello and welcome back to Pop Culture Graveyard. I am Hollis, and this week I'm going to feature the Dead Milkmen. Are you aware of these guys? They were possibly the funniest punk rock band of the 80s. It may seem odd today, but there wasn't much room for humor in the punk rock scene of the early 80s. Most punk rock bands were too busy angrily railing against President Ronald Reagan to joke around. And most popular bands took themselves way too seriously to ever poke fun at themselves. Enter the Dead Milkmen, whose clever wordplay is a perfect example of the beauty of punk rock, where ideas are way more important than musical skill. That said, the band actually sounds good, and have more than enough tasty guitar hooks to keep you listening. Are you a fan of the Dead Milkmen? Are you a fan of the bands that I've been bringing you? If you answered yes to either of those, do me a favor and hit the like button and let me know. Now, on with our show. The classic lineup of the Dead Milkmen is Joe Gennaro, aka Joe Jack Talcum, on guitar and vocals, Rodney Amadeus Anonymous Linderman on vocals and keyboards, Dean Sabatino, aka Dean Clean, on drums and vocals, and Dave Schultheis, aka Dave Blood, on bass and vocals. In June of 1985, the band debuted with Big Lizard in My Backyard. The band produced this themselves with John Wicks, and this is a great album. Incidentally, I paid $6 for it back in the day. Believe it or not, it goes for over $100 now. Thank you, Vinyl Resurgence. This was put out on Fever Records through Enigma. The label is fun. Side A, it says Front Yard. Side B says Backyard. There's a reason this is such a great album, and that's because the Dead Milkmen put out 3 cassettes worth of new music over the previous 2 years. So they had lots of cool songs to choose from when it was time to pick a set list for this album. And I think they chose wisely. Tiny Town kicks off this album perfectly. All the elements that make the Milkmen great are already locked in. Joe's jangly guitar riffs, crisp drumming, a highly melodic bass, and Rodney's faux redneck ranting. I'd like to think that the title of Tiny Town had something to do with the movie The Terror of Tiny Town, featuring an all-dwarf cast. I don't know this, but I'd like to think so. Tiny Town is a simple song about a closed-off community in which everyone is related to everyone else. I do not think that humor would fly today. If the detailed incest wouldn't get them in trouble, then perhaps the faux racism would, but Tiny Town is a catchy little song. Beach Song has a slow walking intro, followed by an explosion into an amped up chorus. The chorus to Beach Song, by the way, is I don't want to be on the beach. No fun. Joe has a nice little melodic guitar run that makes the song really special, but any beach song that has the line, "This is no way to spend the summer," is okay with me. My first of a few favorites on this album is Plum Dumb, which is as incessant as it is infectious. And the chorus features the most gorgeous harmonies the Dead Milkmen would ever pull off. I suspect it's just Joe tripling his voice in overdubs, but still, it's all about a fruit pusher who turns a girl onto plums that he deals out of his automobile. The chorus states, "When those plums take effect, yes, those plums suddenly juice her mind. She's no longer a nervous wreck. Now her nerves are blind. She feels fine. Where can I get some of them plums?" Joe kind of takes over on the chorus, and he sounds just beautiful. Joe Jack Talcum is as close as the Dead Milkmen come to a Tiger Beat quality teen idol. He looks adorable, and he sounds adorable on this track. Swordfish is an ode to a gaming fish, built entirely around one of Dave Blood's funkiest bass lines. While other people believe in technology, astrology, or happy days, Rodney believes in swordfish. No idea. But that's the beauty of the Dead Milkmen. Really funny, off-the-wall lyrics and irresistible melodies. They have more in common with the B-52s than they do with the Dead Kennedys. VFW, or Veterans of a Fucked Up World, is another one of my favorites on this album. It has the chorus, "Fucked up world, we're all veterans of a fucked up world." I love it when a song is about something. It opens on a bad little boy whose parents are trying to make him a good boy by sticking downers in his food. VFW is one of their most cohesive songs, to be totally honest, detailing the day-to-day indignities of living in a fucked up world. And let's face it, folks, we still do. Rostabilly is another one of Rodney's fake redneck rants. My baby drives a truck, my baby is good luck. My baby has a pet duck, and my baby is a heck of a Friend. Serrated Edge features wonderful lyrics about a guy founding a hillside church based solely around Charles Nelson Riley. His congregation? 15 girls who take part in his orgy. You guys like religious music? Lucky is a really rockin' tune that details a whole lot of people who died sudden deaths, with a refrain that you may not be so lucky. Incidentally, it took me till this episode to realize that one of my favorite lines in the song, like J. Paul Muni on the silver screen, is actually like a cheap horror movie on the silver screen. I thought they combined Paul Muni with J. Paul Getty and got J. Paul Muni. And I was like, that's so clever. These wonderful madcaps. It still sounds like that to me. The title track, Big Lizard in My Backyard, is very easy to understand. It's all about this reptilian Clifford-like character who our song's subject can't afford to feed anymore. If the song's lyrics are to be believed, the army stepped in to deal with it, and the big lizard is now enjoying life in El Salvador. Bitchin' Camaro is next, and it was their, quote, hit, unquote. I believe there are two sets of Dead Milkmen fans. Those who love the first half of Bitchin' Camaro, and those who love the second half of Bitchin' Camaro. I find the opening comedy sketch lead-in somewhat charming, but I definitely fall into the latter camp. I'm never as happy as when the band is dishing out catchy lyrics and guitar hooks at the speed of sound. The opening features Rodney, Amadeus, Anonymous, Linderman, and Joe Jack Talcum Gennaro speaking off the cuff about what they're going to get up to. I consider Joe the Johnny Thunders of the Dead Milkmen, and his, oh wow, how'd you get a car? Always makes me think of Johnny's How Does She Dance from the New York Dolls cover of Great Big Kiss. Rodney sings a jazzy yet inflammatory Love Me Two Times at the height of the AIDS crisis. But once the band kicks the song into overdrive, I defy you not to love it. They even throw in a Tony Orlando and Dawn shout-out. Bitchin' Camaro got a lot of play on college radio and allowed the band to tour extensively. So every future success that the Dead Milkmen had was built on the back of Bitchin' Camaro's success. Filet of Soul is a straight-up song about how Rodney loses control when he's served his favorite fish dish. I'm going to go ahead and call the next song Spit Sink, the only song ever written about a spit sink. Go ahead and tell me if I'm wrong. I won't go into this song too much. Suffice it to say, do not drink out of the spit sink. Violent School did not age well, but it just goes to show you how quaint the 80s were, where songs about guns in schools could still be seen as humorous. The second part of that 1-2 punch with Violent School is completed with Taking Retards to the Zoo, which just underlines how un-PC the Milkmen were back then. The next song, Junkie, has one of my favorite couplets on this album. My best friend is a junkie, it's sad but true. My best friend is a junkie. What does your best friend do? That is quintessential Dead Milkmen, and it really sums them up well for the uninitiated. As far as the subject matter is concerned, it was a different time. The song Right Wing Pigeons is prescient as fuck. Although it was written during the years of Ronald Reagan's presidency, I think it very much describes the last 4 years. Check out these lines. The man in the White House who just don't care, he starves little kids and he dyes his hair. He's just a right-wing pigeon from outer space, sent here to destroy the human race. He don't give a damn about you or me, he just buys guns and watches TV. The song Dean's Dream is my absolute favorite song on this album, and my favorite all-time song by the Dead Milkmen. It's got Joe on lead vocals, and prior to Punk Rock Girl, it is the best Joe-centric song. It's exactly what it sounds like. Joe singing about a dream that drummer Dean once had. The dream opens on him watching a cooking show with a horse meat dish, and it ends up in a fight with a bunch of guys, one of which pulls a knife. That dream took a turn, but he's alright. He's alright. The entire song is held together by a chorus in which he escapes to a theater to see a girl with long blonde hair. It is the Dead Milkmen at their most charming, and I cannot recommend that song highly enough. Laundromat Song is the Dead Milkmen's idea of a love song, and it finds Rodney at the wash and fold, crushing on a girl who's dyeing her jeans in separate machines. Nutrition is a cool as fuck song about a kid who cares about the stuff he eats. And it ends with a name check of their good friends FOD, which stands for Flag of Democracy, who were a fellow Pennsylvania punk band that the Dead Milkmen would play with for years. This album was critically acclaimed. It did not sell a ton of records, but this allowed their already tiny, rabid fan base to become a little bit bigger and even more rabid. Even though the Milkmen would have more famous songs on other albums, I would still make this my entry point for anyone who's looking to get into the Dead Milkmen. Check out Big Lizard in My Backyard. If you do not like this, you will not like the Dead Milkmen. Released in very late December of 1985, Eat Your Paisley. Dead Milkmen produced this with John Wicks and with their manager, Dave Reckner. When Joe enrolled in Temple University, he met Dave Reckner. And Dave is the one who introduced Joe and Rodney to Dean Clean, who would later become their drummer. He was drumming with a band called Narthex. So Dave Reckner was in on the ground floor of the Milkmen. They are much improved musicians here, and the songs are recorded a lot cleaner. The record just sounds more produced. At times, their sound here now reminds me a little bit of Television Personalities, if you want an obscure reference. But it's still the Milkmen you love. Opener Where the Tarantula Lives features one of my favorite Milkmen lines, B.F. Skinner has eaten my dinner. These were some learned chaps. KK Suck 2 is a sweet little instrumental, which is rare for the boys. This album houses Beach Party Vietnam, which is my favorite song on this album. I dare you to try and come up with a Vietnam-based nifty chorus that's as clever as this. It's a beach party Vietnam, surfing with the Viet Cong, cooking hot dogs with napalm, a beach party Vietnam. How do you not love that shit? I love the smell of hot dogs in the morning. It smells like Paisley. The whole song rides on top of Dave Blood's brilliant bass playing, and is possibly their most fun song. I Hear Your Name again sees a kinder, gentler Milkman, as we're getting back to a love song. 2 Feet Off the Ground is a slow burn rocker with an absolutely scorching chorus. It's about lighting up a smoke, taking a toke, looking around and finding yourself 2 feet off the ground. Pretty self-explanatory. The thing that only eats hippies finds the titular monster eating flower children left and right, while the punks scream yippee. The song even features a reference to the band Husker Du. Now it's got a sweet tooth for long hair. So Bob and Greg and Grant, you should beware. It even features a devastating slam against the Grateful Dead. Following the Dead is how it gets its kicks. Shame it wasn't born in 1966. Another line I love is, it ate Stills and Nash before they could shout, and it chewed on David Crosby, but it spit him out. So the thing has standards, or values his sobriety. Swampland of Desire finds the song's subject willing to plant his feet inside his lady's quagmire of love. Moron begins with the incredible couplet, hanging out in the commode, listening to Depeche Mode. But from there the attacks really start against a trendy loser who is only following the trends so that he can have some friends. My favorite section, and a snapshot of the 80s, is, voted for Reagan not once but twice. Think that Jerry Falwell's nice. Do you keep your brains on ice? Why are you a moron? The Fez asks the lyrical question, who has angered the volcano god? The Fez may be the only song ever written that references both the Butthole Surfers and the periodic table of the elements. The song features 3 musical in-jokes, where it references Eddie Cochran's Summertime Blues, Jimi Hendrix's Purple Haze, and the Butthole Surfers, The Shah Sleeps in Lee Harvey's Grave. It's a really fun way to end this album, and it's got atmosphere and humor in equal amounts. In July of 1987, the Milkmen release Bucky Fellini. Producer Brian Beattie was one of the original members of the band Fang. Brian had been in the Austin-based band Glass Eye, and he had also worked with Daniel Johnston, so he was used to offbeat personalities like the Milkmen. Incidentally, drummer Dean Clean is credited here only as Mallory. I'm not sure if Dean was hiding from the government at the time or was just a really big Family Ties fan. This album incidentally features a warning. This album contains reverb. Do not try this at home. Album opener The Pit kicks off with a spoof-like opening of Sweet's Ballroom Blitz. The chorus is classic Milkmen though. A he and a ho and I love my baby so in the bottom of the bottomless pit. The band also does I Am the Walrus. No, not that I Am the Walrus. Wait, does that one begin with the line, a young Watusi watches I Love Lucy? Oh, no? Yeah, that's a different I Am the Walrus. I have a soft spot in my heart for the song Watching Scotty Die. I have to tell you a quick story. I was a DJ for many, many years in Manhattan. When I would play this one place on Sundays, every single Sunday, when this big, tough-looking bouncer worked there, with a bald head, very imposing looking, given to rage easily, and you didn't want to mess with him. But when I would play Watching Scotty Die, he would get a big smile on his face, dance around and sing along like a little kid. And it made me so happy to see this transformation that I played Watching Scotty Die every Sunday night for years. I feared no reprisals because he was the toughest guy in the room. If anyone said anything during Watching Scotty Die, he would have taken a break from his joyous singing and killed them. Going to Graceland is all about going to Graceland, but in typical Dead Milkmen fashion, the lines are, when my time comes, that's how I want to go. Stoned and fat and wealthy and sitting on the bowl. But don't get too upset, because the Milkmen are actually closet Elvis fans. They have to be, because in the song, they know that Elvis recorded the song Moody Blue in his jungle room. So being Elvis fans gives them carte blanche. Big Time Operator is a fun, campy rave-up and features the shout, LSD, PCP, MDA, ecstasy, yeah. The song You'll Dance to Anything, which not only got a single release, but a lot of remixes, is worth listening to simply because it's so primitive. Using one of the first drum machines and a really cheesy sampler, it's a charming flashback to when something so primitive could sound cutting edge. As for the song's subject matter, I do not agree with its attacks on Susie and the Smiths and Public Image Limited, or anyone dressed in black. The Badger song is one of my favorite songs on this album, and it just highlights how much I love it when these guys keep things simple. Here, the song's subject simply wants to be friends with the badger. I love Critters. Taco Land is another great song that I believe wouldn't be out of place on the first album. It's even got a little country western flavor, as Joe plays a dobro on that track. City of Mud is all about a little adobe town, where they're going to drag Bruce Springsteen and other top 40 clowns through the street until they resemble a side of beef. I swear I had no idea that the Dead Milkmen had so many musical vendettas until I re-listened to all these albums for this episode. They were angry. It seems all of their enemies were enemies because they were more successful. Rocket Ship is a fun sing-along about a guy who's leaving today for Planet X. You sure these guys don't know the B-52s? Nitro Burnin' Funny Cars is a self-fulfilling prophecy about how no one will write a song called Nitro Burnin' Funny Cars. Surfing Cow is next, and it's some of the sweetest sounding, most inspired music the Milkmen had ever made. You'll think it's an instrumental until about a minute in when Rodney starts looking for his baby, who looks like Patti Smith. I think in lots of ways, Surfing Cow is the best song on this album. Surf's Up. Next is Blood Orgy of the Atomic Fern, and I have to point out that this album's previous owner, way back in the day, crossed out the word orgy. They also got it on the record as well, because I guess they didn't want their kid exposed to that word. The joke's on that parent though, because there are way more unseemly words on the record itself. My favorite lines in Blood Orgy of the Atomic Fern are, "You are invited. You might want to bring some extra towels, just in case someone happens to get disemboweled." Way to protect him from the word orgy, Mom. Jellyfish Heaven ends the album with music ripped off from Sweet Jane by the Velvet Underground. And the lyrics claim that Jellyfish Heaven is where jellyfish go to get away from Mormons and drunk Eskimos. And if the Milkmen are to be believed, it's a lot like LA. So the songs on here were very much a continuation of the stuff you liked on Eat Your Paisley. But there was nothing to suggest that they were about to make a jump to a better album, which they did. In May of 1988, the band released Beelzebubba. Yes, I do have to say it like that. This was produced again by Brian Beattie and engineer Mike Stewart. It is a very fitting cover for an album recorded in Texas. Check out that fantastic cover shot. Just the attitude on his face. The title is, of course, a cross between Beelzebub and the southern nickname Bubba. The man featured on the cover is the father of lead singer Rodney Anonymous, and he looks like the perfect image for the faux redneck voice that Rodney has been singing in since the debut album. Incidentally, if you haven't seen Rodney lately, he's starting to look like this. The album kicks off with Brat and the Frat. The song is equal parts Jewish horror and punk rock fuck off. It features my favorite line, "I hope they kick your Harvard ass." Anything anti-frat is okay with me. RC's Mom has some wife-beating lyrics that did not age well, but musically this is a lot more mature sound from the Milkmen, and they're a lot funkier. Why yes, those are saxophones you hear. The next song, Stewart, one of my all-time favorite Dead Milkmen songs. It sees Rodney take the titular young'un under his wing as he tries to explain to this young man what the queers are doing to the soil. It's Rodney's finest moment as the Dead Milkmen frontman, in my opinion. Unlike other songs, it never gets old, and it builds to a climax. And it's just plain funny. It skewers conspiracy theorists and homophobes in one fell swoop. That's God's work. I Walk the Thinnest Line is another one of my favorites on this album, as it perfectly illustrates the duality of man with punk rock accuracy. Whether you're bad or good, or sad or glad, you will love this song. If the song title Sri Lanka Sex Hotel doesn't paint the picture for you, perhaps this couplet will help. Let's have sex with strangers in the men's room. We can do it and not get caught. Ladies and gentlemen, we have reached Punk Rock Girl. This is probably the one Dead Milkmen song that people know. If they were Squeeze, it would be their Tempted. If they were Led Zeppelin, it would be their Stairway to Heaven. Punk Rock Girl is an ode to a punk rock girl, but I read the song a little differently than I did in my youth. Back in the day, I thought, oh my God, wouldn't it be great to have her as your girlfriend? But the singer Jack Talcum is gay. So my read on Punk Rock Girl is that Joe is overwhelmed by the personality of this punk rock girl because she has this strong feminine energy and can wield it. And he wants to be with her, but if given his choice, he'd rather be her. So I see that he wants to be best friends with this girl and travel around the world and have adventures with her because he's drawn to her strength. But I don't see it as like a love song in the typical sense. Anyway, the song details how he meets this punk rock girl. Went to Zipperhead, which was this real cool clothing store in Philly where you could buy punk rock clothing. He meets this punk rock girl. They go to a pizza place. There's a Beach Boys song playing. Now, his character says it was California Dreamin'. Everyone who hears the song is like, oh, those idiots, they got the song wrong. They didn't get the song wrong. They know that California Dreamin' is by the Mamas and the Papas. But it's funnier if this punk rock character in the song, this punk rock kid, does not know who does it. Oh, it's a California song. It's by the Beach Boys. If anything, that just speaks to the tiny worldview of that punk rock kid. So I think it works perfectly. Punk Rock Girl blew up, much like Bitchin' Camaro did, only bigger, because now there was a thing called MTV. And the Milkmen actually performed on MTV twice. And the first time, they were on 120 Minutes. And they performed unplugged, and that's very cool. I will put the link below. And the second time they were on MTV, they performed on Downtown Julie Brown's show, in which they did not belong. They wanted to play live, but MTV would not let them. So they made a list of demands, and they said, we'll only play on MTV if you do this, 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 and this. And MTV had money to burn and were like, sure. So Dean Clean got a big drum kit. He asked for a massive drum kit. So that's not his drum kit when you see the clip. I'll put it below. And Rodney, who does not sing on this, has a tuba. And he's just running around stage pretending to play the tuba. Probably actually playing the tuba. And Dave Blood is there, mostly laughing at his friends. And Joe out there selling the song, singing along, doing a pretty good job of lip syncing, but laughing occasionally at his bandmates, looking adorable in a little baseball cap. It's a fun performance and really shows you why the Milkmen did not go further. They would not play the game. Anyway, this is how successful Punk Rock Girl was. The record company immediately pressured the band into having more songs where Joe sang lead, and the band pushed back and kept doing their own thing. But that kind of stress from the record company had to weigh on the band. Side 2, track 1, the power slot, goes to Smokin' Banana Peels, which the band did a video for, in which an In His Prime Bob Dylan was quoted repeatedly in archived film footage. The song has a few parts to it, and it's the most adventurous music that the Dead Milkmen would attempt. It's got abrasive parts, it's got mellow parts, and it's got lots of psychedelic touches. The band actually released a Smokin' Banana Peels LP. I'd call it an EP, but it's got 5 versions of Banana Peels on one side, and it's got 5 other songs on the other side. So that's an LP. Incidentally, the design of this is rock solid. It's of course a play on the Velvet Underground and Nico debut album. That's a Dead Milkmen sticker on the overripe banana that's being peeled. And it's spot on the back too. Believe it or not, this was produced by David and Don Was of Was Not Was. Yes, the same Don Was that is now president of Blue Note Records. So the band was serious about this release. Although it's hard to say anyone's serious about this when you consider that side 2 features songs like The Puking Song, Depression Day Dinner, and I Hate Myself. In any case, it's one of their best songs. The guitar song is another favorite of mine, and it sees Joe take over on lead vocals, and he pays tribute to that sound coming out of the hole in the wood. It's the guitar. Born to Love Volcanoes is a really fun rave-up. Everybody's Got Nice Stuff But Me and Howard Beware are very catchy songs. Ringo Buys a Rifle is famous only for being Jack Talcum's least favorite Dead Milkmen song. And the song Life is Shit is as close as the Dead Milkmen ever come to a band philosophy. It's a real downer though, and not a great closer when you consider that this houses some of the best music the Milkmen ever made. This album ends the Dead Milkmen's classic period. That sounded weird. The Dead Milkmen did not have what other bands would call a classic period. But being their most successful album, and their last album to feature any Milkmen classics, it's pretty safe to call this the end of their high water mark. In July of 1990, the band released Metaphysical Graffiti. Aside from a funny title and a great cover, there isn't much on this album that lives up to their previous albums. Methodist Coloring Book is a solid track, as is Anderson, Walkman, Buttholes, and How, featuring guest vocalist Gibby Haynes from the Butthole Surfers. Unfortunately, when Enigma Records was eaten up by Capitol Records, the Milkmen found themselves without a record label. In April of 1992, Soul Rotation was released. This album saw Joe step in as vocalist, with Rodney Anonymous simply playing keyboards on this album. Apparently Rodney had a deal with Joe, where Rodney would sing lead for the first 5 albums. But after that, if he didn't want to sing lead, he didn't have to, and he didn't want to. This album was their first on Hollywood Records. Incidentally, Hollywood Records was famous for mismanagement. So this album really did not get any kind of PR push, and it slowly died. In October of 1993, the band released Not Richard, but Dick. This album houses a song which Jack Talcum has called his favorite of all Dead Milkmen songs, The Woman Who Was Also a Mongoose. Aside from that track, there's nothing too inspired here. The Dead Milkmen found themselves without a record company, again. In 1995, the band released Stoney's Extra Stout, Pig. The band did not tour the album. The band had decided to break up. The idea was to put together one last album and then disband. And that's just what they did. The Dead Milkmen were a big influence on geek rock, pop punk, emo, and straight up old-fashioned punk rock. They're wildly underrated, but I'll be putting links below to all my favorite songs, so check it out. That is it for this week on Pop Culture Graveyard. Hope you enjoyed this week's episode. If you did, please leave me a comment and let me know. And if you'd like to support the channel, please visit patreon.com/popculturegraveyard. And I will see you next week with a lot more cool stuff.